rain pounded against the concrete as the last echoes of thunder rolled across Seattle's skyline. In the dim glow of a parking garage, two little girls trembled behind an old sedan. The older one, barely 7, held her sister tight, eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't belong to children. When the sound of footsteps drew near, she whispered, trembling, "Can you save my sister?" Those 7 words froze the man who found them. That man was Nathan Cole, a multimillionaire CEO who thought he had seen everything success could buy until that night. Stay with this story because what happened next would make even the most logical mind believe in miracles. Nathan had stayed late again, long after his staff had gone home. The 42-year-old biotech executive had built an empire from scratch, yet, inside, he felt nothing but static. His penthouse was spotless, his calendar full, his heart empty. Divorce papers had been signed months ago, and the silence that followed him everywhere was more unbearable than failure itself. He had told himself he stayed late to focus, but truthfully, he stayed because he couldn't stand the sound of being alone. That's what made the voice in the garage so jarring, fragile, pleading human. He had just stepped off the elevator, briefcase in hand, when he heard the sound. It was faint, like someone muffling a cry. He stopped. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe his mind, tired from too many sleepless nights, was inventing ghosts again. But then, it came again, a hiccuped sob, too soft to ignore. His pulse quickened as he followed the echo deeper into the garage, shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The motion sensor lights flickered to life, painting everything in sterile blue-white. And there, near a cracked pillar, he saw them. 2 little girls, soaked and shaking, clutching each other like the world might disappear if they let go. The older one looked up first, her face smudged with dirt, eyes far too sharp for her age. The smaller one hid behind her, whimpering softly. Nathan froze, torn between reason and instinct. This wasn't his world. This was chaos, vulnerability, danger. Yet something deep inside him stirred. Maybe it was the memory of his own daughter lost in the divorce. Maybe it was the rawness of that whispered plea. He knelt slowly, careful not to scare them. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. Are you hurt?" The older girl didn't answer. She just whispered again, voice cracking, "Please, just save my sister." The words cut through him like glass. Save her from what? From whom? Nathan scanned the garage, suddenly aware of how isolated it was. No guards, no cameras nearby, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the tremor in the girl's hands. He noticed her shoes, thin, soaked through. The smaller one's lips were blue. Every logical part of him screamed to call security, call the police, let someone else handle this. But the look in the older girl's eyes was something he couldn't ignore. It was the look of someone who had already stopped believing adults could help. "My name's Nathan," he said quietly. "I work upstairs. You don't have to be afraid." The little one, Maya, as he'd later learn, peeked out for a second, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit. The older sister, Lily, didn't move. Her voice trembled. "He'll find us." Nathan's chest tightened. "Who will?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her sister closer, as if the question itself was dangerous. For a moment, Nathan hesitated. He could walk away, pretend he never saw them. That's what his world taught him. Don't get involved, unless there's a profit, a plan, a reason. But this moment wasn't about business. It was about humanity. And maybe, deep down, redemption. Slowly, he took off his coat and wrapped it around the girls. "No one's finding you tonight," he said. "You're safe now." Lily's eyes flickered, not with trust yet, but something close, hope, fragile and trembling. As Nathan led them toward the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. He knew exactly who it was. His assistant reminding him of tomorrow's meeting, the one that would finalize a multi-million-dollar merger. But tonight, that world felt smaller than ever. The real world was right here in his arms, a child falling asleep on his shoulder, another gripping his hand as if it were the only solid thing left in the universe. In the elevator's mirrored walls, Nathan caught a glimpse of himself, a man in a $1,000 suit holding two children who owned nothing but fear. The contrast made his throat tighten. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The older one hesitated. "Lily," she whispered, "and that's Maya." He nodded. "Okay, Lily, Maya, let's get you somewhere warm." Her eyes darted toward the doors as they closed, as if afraid someone might still burst in. Nathan glanced down at her, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a silent promise that he would not let them down. When they stepped into his penthouse, the light from the city flooded the room like cold glass. The girl's reflection shimmered against marble floors and chrome fixtures, tiny figures swallowed by luxury. Nathan set Maya on the couch, offered them blankets, and tried to find food, a man with a fridge full of champagne, but nothing for children. The absurdity made him laugh under his breath, then ache. "Guess we'll figure this out together," he murmured. As the girls warmed up, Nathan sat on the edge of a chair phone, still buzzing his life outside this room, demanding answers. But something inside him shifted like a lock clicking open. He didn't know who these children were, or what had driven them into the rain, but he knew one thing for sure: walking away was no longer an option. He looked out across the glittering city, the reflection of three figures instead of one. The night that began in silence now pulsed with a strange, fragile heartbeat. And if you're still watching, remember this moment, because what Nathan Cole chose to do next would test everything he thought he knew about power, sacrifice, and love. Comment below, what would you have done if you were in his place that night? The next morning, the city was washed clean by rain, but Nathan Cole's apartment still felt like a museum of loneliness. His penthouse overlooked downtown Seattle, a gleaming cage of glass and silence. Yet, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Two little girls slept huddled under a throw blanket on his couch, their faces soft with exhaustion. Nathan stood there for a long time, unsure whether to feel relief or panic. He'd spent his entire life solving problems with money contracts and logic. But there was no manual for this, no spreadsheet to explain what to do when two frightened children appear in your life overnight. He brewed coffee quietly, trying not to wake them, but the sound of the machine made the younger one, Maya, stir. She blinked up at him, still half asleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd carried from the garage. "It's okay," he whispered awkwardly, raising a hand in greeting. "You're safe here." She stared at him for a moment, then nodded, trusting him in the simple, unconditional way only children can. When Lily woke, she was different, alert, protective eyes darting around the strange apartment. She sat upright, placing herself between Maya and the unfamiliar world around them. Nathan tried to smile. "Good morning, Lily. I made some breakfast." He motioned toward the kitchen island where cereal boxes and toast waited like offerings from a man who had no idea what kids actually ate. They approached slowly like small animals still deciding if he was dangerous. Maya reached for the cereal first. Nathan poured milk, but misjudged the angle, spilling it across the counter. The girls flinched at the sound. "Sorry," he said, quickly grabbing a towel. "Guess I'm a little out of practice." Lily's expression softened just slightly, and for the first time Nathan saw a flicker of something that wasn't fear. The hours that followed were quiet, but strangely human. Nathan, who once commanded boardrooms and investors with precision, now struggled with juice boxes and mismatched socks. He found himself laughing at the absurdity of it all, the mighty CEO negotiating with a 4-year-old about whether she needed to take a nap. Maya giggled when he tried to braid her hair and failed miserably. Lily, still cautious, watched every move, her eyes scanning for threats he couldn't see. That afternoon, Nathan called his assistant to cancel all meetings for the day. "Personal emergency," he said flatly. When she asked if everything was all right, he hesitated. "Not yet," he answered and hung up. The truth was, he didn't know what all right meant anymore. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from his legal team, the head of HR, even his publicist. Words like liability risk mandatory report flashed across the screen. He knew the rules a man like him couldn't just take in 2 unknown children without consequences. But when he glanced at the girls now, coloring quietly in the corner with a stack of printer paper and highlighters, he realized rules were the last thing that mattered. By late afternoon, the penthouse had begun to change. Where there was once sterile minimalism, there was now a soft chaos, blankets on the floor, crumbs on the counter, the faint hum of cartoons from the TV. The sound of Maya's laughter, light and unguarded, filled the space like sunlight. Nathan had forgotten how powerful that sound could be. At dinner, he made pasta half-burned, under-seasoned, but edible. Lily took small bites, studying him between each one. "Do you live here all by yourself?" she asked finally. He nodded. "Used to. I guess I still do." She lowered her fork. "It's too quiet," she said softly. Nathan looked around and realized she was right. His world had been built on silence, controlled, predictable, sterile. But now that silence felt like something that needed to be broken. When it was time for bed, Nathan set up a small nest of blankets in his guest room. Maya fell asleep quickly, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Lily lingered by the doorway. "You can leave the light on," she whispered. Nathan nodded and stayed for a moment longer, watching her settle in beside her sister. As he turned to go, he heard her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Back in the living room, Nathan sat on the couch, staring out at the city lights flickering against the glass. Somewhere below, a life went on, restaurants, traffic, people who didn't know that just a few floors up, 2 little girls were beginning to feel safe again. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and let out a long breath. He didn't know what came next. He only knew he couldn't go back to the way things were. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting stripes across the living room floor. Maya was sitting cross-legged on the rug, humming softly as she drew with one of his expensive fountain pens. The ink stained her fingers blue. Nathan smiled. "You're an artist now, huh?" She grinned, and for the first time he saw a child instead of a victim. Then, without warning, Lily's voice came from behind him. "He'll look for us." The words were quiet, but the fear beneath them was unmistakable. Nathan turned, meeting her gaze. "Who will?" he asked, but she only shook her head. "He always finds us." Something cold crawled through Nathan's chest. This wasn't just about 2 lost kids. There was a story behind those words, and whatever it wasn't over. He crouched down to Lily's level, steady and sincere. "He's not finding you here. I promise." It was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but one he meant with every part of his soul. And as the morning sun poured into the hollow house, Nathan realized it no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, it felt like a home, fragile, uncertain but alive. The following week, the question haunted Nathan Cole, more than the silence ever had. Who were these girls running from? And where was their mother? The more he watched Lily flinch at sudden noises and Maya curl closer in her sleep, the clearer it became. Someone had broken these children long before he found them. He'd promised they were safe, but promises without answers felt fragile. He began to make calls quietly, cautiously to people who owed him favors. That's how he reached Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman he'd once worked with during a corporate security case years back. She was smart, no nonsense, and the kind of cop who remembered debts that weren't written on paper. When she picked up the phone, her tone was sharp at first. "Nathan Cole. Haven't heard from you in a while." What kind of trouble needs a billionaire's money this time? He hesitated. Not my kind. 2 kids, sisters. They showed up in my garage a few nights ago. Sarah went silent for a beat. Are they hurt? They're scared, Nathan said. Their names are Lily and Maya. I don't know where their mother is, but I think something's very wrong. Sarah sighed, then her voice softened. Text me everything you have. Photos, names, anything. I'll see what I can dig up. That night, Nathan sent her what little information he had, a blurry picture of the girls, a description of the stuffed rabbit Maya never let go of, and the whisper that still echoed in his mind, he'll find us. He didn't sleep. He sat by the guest room door until dawn, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the girls on the other side, feeling the weight of a responsibility he didn't understand, but couldn't abandon. By morning, Sarah called back. Her voice carried the kind of urgency that told him she'd found something, and it wasn't good. Nathan, she said their mother's name is Elena Harper. She was admitted to Harborview Medical Center 4 days ago under the name Jane Doe. Hit-and-run victim. No ID, no emergency contact, severe head trauma. Nathan's stomach dropped. Is she alive? Barely, Sarah said. But yes, you'd better come see for yourself. He hung up and looked toward the kitchen where Lily was helping Maya pour cereal. He didn't know how to tell them. How do you tell 2 little girls that their mother isn't gone but isn't really back either? By the time they reached the hospital, the day had turned gray, a blanket of clouds pressing low over the city. Sarah met them at the entrance, her badge tucked into her jacket, her expression calm but wary. Keep the girls close, she said quietly. Hospitals can be overwhelming. They followed her through sterile hallways that smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Machines beeped in steady rhythms. The walls felt too white, too clean for the kind of pain they held. When they reached room 312, Sarah paused at the door. She's stable, she said softly, but it's going to be hard. Inside, Helena Harper looked impossibly small beneath the white sheets. Bruises bloomed along her arms. A bandage covered part of her forehead. The steady hiss of oxygen filled the silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lily's hand slipped from Nathan's and she ran to the bedside. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice breaking. Maya followed, climbing up onto the chair beside her. Elena stirred her eyelids, fluttering open just enough to see them. Her lips trembled into something like a smile. Mama Maya breathed, clutching her mother's hand. Nathan stood back, throat tight, watching a reunion that was both beautiful and brutal. It was the kind of moment that cracked something open inside him, a reminder of how fragile life was, how easily love could be broken and remade. Elena's gaze shifted to him. For a second, confusion flickered across her face. Then gratitude. Her voice was faint, raspy. "You saved them." Nathan swallowed hard. "Oh, no," he said quietly. "They saved me." The doctor entered, checking the monitors, murmuring about recovery and observation. Sarah stepped aside to speak with him, pulling files and notes from her tablet. Nathan caught pieces of the conversation, words like abuse, protective custody, and pending investigation. When the doctor left, Sarah closed her tablet and exhaled. "There's more," she said. The police report from the accident mentioned another name, Vince Riker. Known enforcer, multiple assault charges. He was seen arguing with Elena 2 nights before she was hit. Nathan clenched his jaw. So he's the one they were running from. Most likely, Sarah said. And if he knows the girls are alive, he might come looking. He looked back at Lily and Maya, still holding their mother's hands, their small faces pressed against her arm. For all his wealth, all his power, he'd never felt so helpless. "What happens now?" he asked. Sarah's tone softened. "We keep her safe. I'll put a watch on this room. But Nathan, you need to understand something. You can't fix this alone." These kids, they need stability, not just shelter. He nodded, but his mind was already made up. Stability wasn't something money bought. It was something you built. He'd failed at that once before with his own family. He wasn't going to fail again. As the hours passed, Elena drifted in and out of sleep. Nathan stayed nearby, keeping the girls entertained with stories about the city lights and seagulls that sometimes flew up this high. When Maya asked if they could stay with him until Mommy feels better, he smiled through the ache in his chest. "As long as you need," he said. That night, when the hospital quieted and Sarah left to file her reports, Nathan sat by the window overlooking the rain-soaked city. He thought about the merger waiting for his approval, the calls he'd ignored, the life that used to define him. It all seemed distant now, like a world he'd stepped out of and couldn't go back to. Behind him, Elena stirred again. Her voice was a whisper barely there. "Promise me," she said, eyes half open. "Don't let him near them." Nathan turned to her steady and sure. "I promise." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't just from fear. "Thank you," she whispered and drifted back to sleep. He sat there until dawn, the city lights fading into morning gray, the sound of the girls' soft breathing mingling with the hum of the machines. For the first time in his life, Nathan understood what it meant to be needed and how terrifying and beautiful that could be. The move to Monterey came quietly, without ceremony or explanation. Nathan didn't tell anyone in his company where he was going, not even Sarah. He just packed what mattered: closed documents the stuffed rabbit Maya refused to leave behind, and drove for hours along the coast until the city lights disappeared in the rearview mirror. When they reached the old beach house overlooking the Pacific, the air felt different. Saltier, calmer. It wasn't an escape, not exactly. It was a pause, a fragile attempt to keep danger at bay long enough for everyone to breathe again. The house had once hosted board retreats and summer parties, but now it felt like a sanctuary. The walls still smelled faintly of cedar, and the sound of waves replaced the sirens that had filled their nights in Seattle. Elena spent her mornings on the porch, still weak, but healing her legs wrapped in a blanket, while she watched the girls collect shells by the water. Lily's laughter, light and clear, drifted through the open windows, and Maya's voice followed behind, high, sweet, unguarded. Nathan hadn't realized how much he missed the sound of joy. They began building something that resembled normal life. Mornings with pancakes and spilled orange juice, afternoons spent painting seashells or feeding seagulls by the fence. Elena started to regain her strength, insisting on helping in the kitchen even when her hands still trembled. Sometimes she and Nathan would talk late into the night, long after the girls had gone to bed, about books, about hope, about how two people could lose everything and still find purpose. There was a softness between them, unspoken but real. For the first time in years, Nathan felt a kind of peace he didn't think he deserved. But peace, he'd learned, never stayed long. The first sign came on a windy afternoon in late autumn. Nathan was in the yard raking leaves when he noticed a gray sedan idling at the end of the street. The windows were tinted, the engine running. It sat there just long enough for his pulse to quicken before driving off. He told himself it was nothing, maybe a lost tourist. But later that night, when Elena closed the curtains, he caught the look in her eyes. She'd seen it too. Then came the phone calls, numbers with no caller ID, no message, just silence. Once, when Nathan answered, there was breathing on the other end, slow, deliberate. He hung up before anger could replace fear. The next morning, he found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Just a single word, written in black marker: soon. Elena's hands shook when she saw it. "It's him," she whispered. "Vince." Nathan took the note and burned it in the fireplace, watching the paper curl into ash. "He's not coming near you," he said firmly. "Not here." But in truth he wasn't sure. He'd seen what men like Vince Riker were capable of, How easily they slipped through systems meant to stop them. He called Sarah that night. "I think he's found us," he said. She promised to alert the local police and have patrol cars check the neighborhood, but Nathan could hear the hesitation in her voice. Protection on paper never felt like protection in reality. Days passed. The tension grew quiet and heavy like air before a storm. The girls sensed it too, though no one said anything. Lily began double-checking the locks before bed. Maya clung to her stuffed rabbit again, the one she'd almost stopped carrying. Even the ocean seemed to change its steady rhythm, replaced by restless waves pounding the shore. One night, as the rain started to fall, the house lost power. The lights flickered, then went out, completely plunging the rooms into darkness. Elena was in the kitchen, the girls watching a movie in the living room. Nathan grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the breaker box. He tried to keep his voice calm. "Stay put," he called out. "It's just a storm." But as he turned the corner toward the back hallway, something cold crawled up his spine. The kitchen window was open. He knew he'd locked it earlier. Muddy footprints trailed across the floor. "Elena," he said, voice low. She appeared behind him, pale, clutching the flashlight. "He's here," she whispered. A sound came from the porch, a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. Then silence. Nathan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He moved to the door, flashlight raised, his body trembling with adrenaline. "Who is it?" he called out. A man's voice came through the rain, smooth and mocking. "You know who it is, Cole. You can't keep them from me forever. Vince Riker." Nathan's grip tightened. "You're not welcome here. The police are on their way." Vince laughed, a sound that chilled the air. "You think they can stop me? She owes me, and I always collect." Behind him, Elena held the girls close, whispering, "Don't listen. Don't move." Lily buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Maya started to cry. The pounding on the door grew louder, faster. Wood splintered. Nathan stood his ground, fear and fury colliding in his chest. He'd built his empire by controlling chaos, but this was different. This was survival. "You're done, Vince," he shouted. "It's over." And then sirens. The sound cut through the storm like salvation. Blue lights flashed through the rain. Sarah's voice rang out from the yard, commanding and fierce. "Police, step away from the house." Vince turned to run, but officers surged from the shadows. Within seconds, he was tackled, face pressed into the mud, wrists cuffed. Lightning flashed, catching the look on his face, a mix of rage and defeat. Nathan opened the door just as Sarah led Vince away. The cold air hit his skin, and only then did he realize how hard he was shaking. Behind him, Elena collapsed into tears, holding the girls as if she'd never let go again. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling away toward the horizon. Nathan turned off the flashlight and looked around the dimly lit room, the overturned chair, the scattered toys, the evidence of fear and resilience mixed together. For the first time in a long time, he let himself breathe. They had survived the night. He walked to Elena and knelt beside her. She looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks, her voice barely steady. "It's over," she said. He nodded, pulling her and the girls into his arms. "It's over," he repeated. But even as he said it, he knew that what had just ended was only one kind of battle, and another kind quieter, but just as important, was about to begin. The trial came faster than anyone expected. Vince Riker sat in the courtroom in handcuffs, his expression blank, his eyes darting toward Elena every chance he got. She sat between Nathan and Detective Sarah Martinez, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lily and Maya waited outside with the social worker, coloring to pass the time, unaware that their mother was finally confronting the man who had nearly destroyed them. The air inside the courtroom felt heavy, thick with years of fear and unfinished stories. Elena's voice shook when she first took the stand. But as she spoke, strength found her again. She told the court about the threats the night he came to their home, the way she'd tried to shield her daughters when he demanded money she didn't have. She told them about the accident that wasn't an accident, about the headlights that had appeared out of nowhere, about waking up in the hospital not knowing if her girls were alive. When she finished, there was silence, the kind that makes people look away because they feel too much. Sarah's testimony followed. Calm, professional, unwavering. She described the night of the arrest, the evidence, the years of prior reports that had gone nowhere until Nathan Cole decided to get involved. Then, it was Nathan's turn. He wasn't a man used to public vulnerability, but as he looked out at the faces before him, the words came. He spoke about finding Lily and Maya that night in the garage, about the fear in their eyes, about what it means to be human when you have every reason not to care. "I didn't save them," he said quietly. "They saved me from forgetting what decency looks like." The judge, a woman with tired eyes but a steady voice, delivered the verdict before noon. Vince Riker was sentenced to prison on multiple counts: child endangerment, assault, attempted kidnapping. No parole, no contact, no chance to crawl back into their lives again. Elena wept, shoulders shaking, and Nathan took her hand beneath the table. Sarah's eyes softened, and even the judge seemed moved as she dismissed the court. Afterward, outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Lily ran into her mother's arms the moment she saw her, and Maya followed, laughing through tears. Nathan stood a few steps back, watching them, letting the joy belong to them first. When Elena turned to him, she didn't need to say anything. He already knew what that look meant. Thank you. Not just for saving us, but for staying when you didn't have to. Months passed. The chaos of survival faded into something quieter, steadier. The beach house became a real home. The walls that once echoed with fear now held warmth. Drawings taped to the refrigerator, the smell of cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings, the sound of music drifting through open windows. Elena had found her footing again. She accepted a position with a local nonprofit that helped women rebuild their lives after domestic abuse. She was nervous at first, afraid her past would define her, but Nathan told her gently, "Maybe that's exactly why they need you." The girls thrived. Lily started 3rd grade and joined a small art club, filling sketchbooks with drawings of lighthouses and oceans. Maya learned to ride a bike, her laughter chasing through the yard like wind. They still had nightmares sometimes, but less often. And when they did, it was Nathan who sat by their beds, humming softly until they drifted back to sleep. He didn't think of himself as a father figure, not at first, but love has a way of redefining things without asking permission. Nathan, too, began to change. He resigned as CEO, shocking his board and partners. The company that once consumed him now felt like a shell of a life that no longer fit. With Sarah's encouragement, he started a foundation, the Harper Foundation for Hope, dedicated to helping families rebuild after trauma. It was a small start, a few grants, a counseling partnership, a helpline. But for the first time, his work meant something more than money or prestige. It meant people. On the foundation's launch night, Elena stood beside him, speaking to a room full of donors, social workers, and survivors. "You don't rebuild a life overnight," she said softly. "You do it one act of kindness at a time, one person willing to believe that broken things can still be made whole." When she stepped down, the applause lasted long after she reached her seat. Nathan turned to her and said, "You're stronger than you think." She smiled. "Maybe, but only because someone reminded me I could be." That summer, the family hosted a small gathering at the beach house. Sarah came with her husband and their golden retriever. Neighbors stopped by, bringing casseroles and wine. The air smelled of grilled corn and sea salt. Children chased each other across the sand as the tide rolled in. At one point, Lily handed Nathan a small stone she'd found, a smooth, heart-shaped pebble she'd painted purple. "You should keep it," she said seriously. for good luck. He closed his fingers around it, feeling its simple, solid weight. Later that evening, after everyone had gone inside, Nathan and Elena sat on the porch, watching the stars appear over the water. The waves whispered against the shore, steady and endless. Inside, the girls' laughter drifted through the windows as they got ready for bed. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Elena said quietly, "You gave us back our lives." Nathan shook his head. "You gave me mine." They sat there until the moon rose high, the sound of the ocean folding into the rhythm of their breaths. When he finally stood to go inside, he paused by the doorway and looked back, the house glowing warm behind him, the world peaceful for once. He slipped the small purple stone into his pocket where it would stay. In the end, the house that love built wasn't made of walls or windows. It was made of second chances, of people who chose compassion over fear, of a man who thought he'd lost everything, and the family who proved that love doesn't just return, it rebuilds. And as Nathan Cole watched the waves roll toward the shore, he realized that home wasn't a place you find. It was something you become. When Nathan Cole first stepped into that rain-soaked garage in Seattle, he was a man hollowed out by success. The kind of man who'd built an empire but lost his soul somewhere along the way. He didn't believe in second chances, not for himself, not for anyone. But the night he found Lily and Maya, two frightened sisters, clutching each other in the dark, something shifted. That single moment of compassion cracked open the walls he'd spent years building. What began as an act of impulse became the beginning of a redemption neither he nor the girls could have imagined. Through sleepless nights, uncertainty, and fear, Nathan learned that real courage isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. It's in the quiet decisions, the ones no one sees, when you choose kindness over convenience and humanity over self-preservation. He didn't plan to become a guardian or a father figure or a savior. But that's the beauty of life. The moments that change us most rarely come announced. They come disguised as inconvenience, chaos, or pain. Elena Harper's journey was one of survival and rebirth. She endured the cruelty of someone who sought to break her spirit. Yet she emerged a stronger proof that resilience doesn't mean being untouched by hardship, but rather rising again despite it. Her courage to rebuild, to forgive, and to help others find hope became the heartbeat of the family she and Nathan formed. And in that fragile new home by the sea, surrounded by laughter and healing, both of them discovered that love isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Lily and Maya, once symbols of fear, became the soul of the story. Their innocence reminded Nathan and Elena of what truly matters, the power of trust, of holding someone's hand even when you're scared. Those little girls who had known too much darkness for their age brought light into a man's life that had long forgotten what light looked like. Together, they built something no amount of wealth could buy, a home born from compassion, forgiveness, and the quiet decision to stay when walking away would have been easier. Nathan's choice to risk his reputation, his comfort, even his safety, wasn't just about saving two children. It was about saving the man he'd lost inside himself. In the end, he discovered that love isn't a feeling, it's an act. A decision you make again and again, even when it's hard. And maybe that's the lesson we can take with us. We live in a world that often values achievement over empathy, results over relationships. But true success is measured not by what we own, but by what we give and who we choose to stand beside when it matters most. Nathan's story reminds us that every small act of kindness ripples outward in ways we can't predict. You never know when your willingness to help might save a life, or even save you. So, if you're watching this and something in your heart feels heavier or warmer than before, hold on to that. Let it remind you that compassion still changes lives, that redemption isn't reserved for saints, it's available to anyone willing to start again. And if this story touched you, inspired you, or simply reminded you that goodness still exists in a complicated world, take a moment to support what we do. Subscribe to Restoring Tales. Leave a comment, share your thoughts. Every word of encouragement helps us keep telling stories that heal, stories that remind us that even after the darkest nights, there's always a way back to the light. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to believe in second chances again, and together we can help them find it.